is how do we use these technologies to accelerate kids mastering the NET standards or the ASL standards and still meet the agenda for meeting those state standards and making sure that teachers are covering their end for the requirement that they are absolutely bound to with the state standardized testing. I mean, it's that dichotomy.
Right. And so this is the part where I want to hand out, even to the avatars, those Chinese finger pulls, you know, where the only way you can really get your fingers out is to go the opposite of what your instinct is. So we have study after study, experience after experience, that kids who are engaged, who have rigorous tasks, who are better thinkers, actually are better test score takers. That the boredom that is rampant with our kids is actually contrary to the attention that we need from them to be able to master any number of standards. So the first picture you saw, the man looking through the binoculars past the cars and at the sheep in the woods story, I'm just going to say start as an administrator, as a leader, a teacher leader, peer past the stuff and start to be really curious about how much fire and heat is behind the tasks. So I have this metaphor, turning up the heat, that I've had for probably 15 years. I've just really solidified it. I'm getting ready to write a book in which we merge inquiry, digital media, and kids as meaning makers and media makers together. And I've had the great pleasure of working with 2 districts a week to 2 weeks a month to take a look at what it's going to take for the teachers to sort of make that bridge. So turning up the heat is a metaphor. But think of it as 5 pepper, 6 pepper, or that some people are just content to have green, gold, bland. So if you'll play with that metaphor a little bit, you can have a great amount of fun with the teachers. And by the way, fun has a lot of energy in it, even for adults. So the first thing is give me an H, and an H is for higher order thinking. So when you're designing the tasks, and certainly when you design the task, you also have to have the next steps of saying, well, what do I need to do to master? And I'm going to have you go back to the H for just a minute. That we're not only wanting the rigor, but we're wanting to know that kids are being knowledge producers, that they're having to make a decision, look at a body of knowledge and information and make a decision, or an invention or a solution. We want them analyzing. We want them synthesizing. And out of that, if kids are going to be giving you a product that demonstrates what they know and understand, which comes from Wiggins' work of saying, how will kids demonstrate what they know and understand? We want kids to know what's the type of communication, what's the purpose of that. So if you'll go to the next slide, I have on my website a set of scoring guides that are not a scoring guide for multimedia, not a scoring guide for movies or podcasts, but quite frankly, it's a scoring guide on saying, what's your purpose? If you're doing a public service announcement, whether it's in a comic book form or a movie or a podcast or in Second Life or wherever it is that you're organizing with the technology, what you're really saying is that there's a certain way to organize a powerful public service announcement and make sure it gets delivered so that teachers can coach for that rigor, and you coach for that rigor in their narratives, their storylines, and you for sure coach that rigor in the storyboard. There's not enough technology in the world to decorate up superficial thinking and thin thinking. So if we're going to take the time to create these multimedia products, let's put more rigor in there and let the type of communication guide the rigor and the purpose. So the next piece that we look at is give me an E. We've talked about engaged learning, engaged learners, the piece about boredom with kids. It turns out that boredom actually thins the cortex, the membrane of the cortex, and that sustained boredom actually changes the chemistry of the brain.
I knew it.
And
go ahead.
Well, it's a problem. It's not something you tell your kids get over at schools like that, and you have to be 18 before you get to have a life. We know that kids who are driving the questions, we create cultures of curiosity. So the good news is you can turn that around pretty fast with rigorous questions. So we made questions in Forsyth County Schools in our project be the core technology that we used, that we help teachers know the difference between closed questions that were fact-based and open questions that were reasoning, thinking questions. And it really is just a matter of how active can you get the brain and get them into flow states, and who's driving those questions. So keeping the eye on the question of the task. So someone wonders, well, what would you see at a whiteboard if it was transforming? I would be looking for what-if questions, that you had information and you would move it around and you'd move it into new patterns, that kids would be able to take that information and have some reasoning question, whether the kid was holding the stylus or the teacher was holding the stylus. If you peer past the stuff and look for a driving question, you're going to find some heat. So the next letter is give me an A. And you know what? These are high-yielding instructional strategies. All of these strategies led out by Marzano, by many wonderful thought leaders. And it turns out that when kids have a context for learning, they actually can learn more information, dense information, and they'll put more energy to it. So A is for authenticity, either having a simulated audience or a authentic audience where kids are not trained to solve problems, but they're actually given problems to solve that contribute to the community. There's a really nice word here called cognitive coaching. Cognitive apprenticeship. And what it means is that you be the historian, and what are the tools and the kinds of problems that historians solve? You be the scientist, you be the journalist, you be whatever that hat is that you put on. If you've been following Grant Wiggins' work, he has something called the graphs task. And that means that what's the goal, what's the audience, what's the situation, what's the product. It's pretty simple as saying, what's the point of learning this? Ted McCaney has a wonderful book called Teaching for Tomorrow, in which he has the kids role play in high school. He sets up a context and a reason why they would go after learning a lot of information. And he's very intentional about what that essential question is, what the problem task is. Again, these are not new strategies. They're just coming together, and the role for technology is so exciting here because technology can actually connect them and accelerate them. So let's just talk about the student who only turns in their assignment to the teacher versus they can publish to the world. Just that one medium allows so much more to happen. So we're doing a international debate right now with voice threads. Kids are doing asynchronous debates with countries, and they're having this huge audience, and it gives it so much power. The last one really is the T, and it's for technology. But what it says is that it's the end of all the instructional decisions. How you use the technology is fashioned into the instructional decisions that are made along the way. And do you have added value? Have you made something that would have been impossible or impaired happen before that?